When working as a Salesforce admin, one of the most important things that you can do is set the system up for somebody else to use it. And today we're going to talk about how to create a new user and apply to that user the characteristics they need in order to do their job. All of that today on Blue Cloud University. Hello, Cloud Dwellers, and welcome back to another tutorial that looks into the inner workings of Salesforce. Today, I want to talk about something incredibly important when you're setting up any organization. Of course, there are going to be people who need to be able to use Salesforce. And so today we're going to talk about the importance of creating users within Salesforce. And I'm going to show you how we set users up and how we start to apply different characteristics to different people in our organization so that they can do the jobs they need to do. Let's jump on in and take a peek. All right, now in Salesforce, maybe I'm in the view of someone who's actually using Salesforce and I need to change my view to the back end so that I can actually do some admin work. So I'm going to come up here to my gear icon and I'm going to go into setup. So now I can affect some changes in here. And in this case, I need to create a new user, Jim Bishop, and I need to be able to put him into the system so that he can have access to Salesforce and do what he needs to do. So I'm going to start by going over here to the upper left-hand side, and I'm going to put in users, and that's going to allow me to very quickly find what I'm looking for, which is the new users feature here within our users, and I'm going to give it a click. And when I come in here, you can see that there are a number of users already in my trial version of Salesforce, and we have a number of different names and people in here. And also, you'll notice over here on the right-hand side that they have different roles. Some are the CEO, okay. This person is part of this American sales team, this is part of the worldwide sales team, this is part of the European sales team, etc. And also, there are what we call profiles, and we have standard platform users, standard users. So what the heck is all this? Well, the role is really within a hierarchy what the person should be able to see of the people who work for them or underneath them in the hierarchy. And now it has very little to actually do with your job description. It has more to do with where are you in the hierarchy. So given this reasoning, the CEO is at the top of the hierarchy. And what the CEO should have access to, you can argue, is all of the data that everyone who works for the company has access to. Whereas the vice president has access to all of the people who work under the vice president. And so the CEO can see what the vice president sees, and the president maybe can see what the vice president sees, but the person who works, the manager who works underneath the vice president, can only see what they have underneath them. So it's really about access to data as much as anything. And when you think about a hierarchy of who should see what, that's what the role does. And by the way, we'll talk much more deeply about roles in a future lesson. Now, what is a profile? Well, a profile is really a group of permissions that we assign to a user. And what we're basically saying is, hey, in order to do your job, here are the tools that you're going to need. Here's the things that you need to be able to see, and here are the things you need to be able to do with them. And so in this context, we have a number of different profiles, and we're saying this person is a standard platform user, or just a standard user. I'm down here. I'm a system admin, and you probably are as well. And so this is going to give me access to things that the standard user won't have access to. Now, in our situation, Jim is coming in actually as an intern. That's right, he's going to be working for the sales team, but he's an intern. So does it stand to reason that there are things that Jim should not have access to? 100%, right? There are going to be a lot of financial records Jim just doesn't need to see in order to do his job. Now, if Jim was coming in as the VP of marketing, would that list of things that he needs to see change? Yes, once again, 100%, he'd need access to a lot more data. So we need to think about where Jim is in not only his role, kind of probably lower end, right? But also in the profile that we assign to him. And we'll talk much more deeply about profiles in a future lesson as well, because it's as you imagine, it's a fairly deep topic. But for what we want to be able to do today, we simply want to create a new user and make sure that they have an assigned role and a profile, at least to get them started. So to do that, I'm going to come up here, I'm going to click on the new user button, and let's set about getting Jim into the system. Now, in order to do this, we're going to have to fill out a few things in our form. You can see there are a couple of different elements in here. Anything that has red next to it is absolutely 100% required for us to have the initial saving of this user. So let me put some information in here. Here is Jim. His last name is Bishop. Now, down here it says alias. And if I just click on the alias, it's going to automatically take Jim's first name and last name and meld them together and say, hey, we don't have anybody in the system called J Bish. Let's use that. So there we are. That'd be fine. And I can also come down here and I can put in Jim's email address. And let's say he goes by J Bish. That's, that's his thing. And he is a member of XYZ Corp.com. So that is his email address. Now, when I click on this, it's going to put it in as his username as well. The thing you need to remember is that every person who works in Salesforce needs to have a username, and that username needs to be in the form of an email address. Now, does it need to be their email address? The answer is actually no. It just needs to be in the form of an email address. It doesn't even have to be a working email address. So it's automatically saying, hey, I'm putting this new email address in here, and I'm going to just use it as the username because I looked in the system and nobody has this email address, has never used this in the past. So guess what? You're brand new. And down here, you notice it came up with a nickname. Now, probably we could shorten and change this as well, but this is Jim's unique identifier if we ever need to be able to look in the system and find him. So we'll leave it there it is. Now, we could have certainly put in title and company and department, but in the interest of time, we want to focus on the things we need to have. Up here on the right-hand side, again, we're running into this concept of role. And if we go in here, you can see that there are a few different roles in this org that we can choose from. In this case, Jim is going to be working for the American sales team, so we're going to include him as part of that role. Now, down under here, it's going to say what type of license should we give Jim. Salesforce has many different types of licenses depending upon what we want to be able to do or who needs access to what. So, for example, I could come in here and say, hey, we have somebody who doesn't actually work for our company, but we want to be able to communicate with them using our ingrained communication tool, Chatter. So I can say, let's go with a Chatter external user. So we have a license for that. We may have a license for Chatter free, which we can share and distribute to allow people to join our conversations within our organization, etc. So as you can see, there are a number of different things. And again, in the future, we'll talk about all of these as we need to. Our focus is going to be down here. We're just simply Salesforce. This is a Salesforce license. It's going to be a Salesforce user. And in this case, we want to make sure that Jim can come in here and access Salesforce to do his job. So I'm going to select that. And the final thing I'm going to do is underneath profile, I need to choose a profile that we can assign to Jim. Now, again, it says contract manager, custom marketing profile, etc. I have an intern user profile, which will be perfect for what I want to be able to do with Jim. So I'm going to select that as the profile of choice. Now you'll notice that this user has already been classified as being active, and that's fantastic. Now let's do one more thing. We're going to come down here. And by the way, if I wanted to include information about Jim, where he lives and how to get in touch with him, if we ever need to send him mail, I could include that right here. But again, we want to come down and make sure that anything that is in red has been addressed. And here what we're seeing is that Jim, it's defaulting to Pacific time for Jim. And Jim actually is working out of New York City. So I'm going to simply click on this and we're going to come up here and we have it in here somewhere. Let me just find it. There we go. So Eastern Daylight Time America, and specifically in New York. And by the way, his locale is English speaking, and that is his language. If there were another language, I could say, by the way, Jim only speaks Swedish, for example, and we would modify some things. Again, we'll talk much deeper about how we can modify things. We're just going to create a very basic user right now. All right, so all that being done, I'm going to come up here and click on the Save button, and it's updating records. And now I'm seeing that we have a new user named Jim Bishop. And if I ever need to go back in and make any changes to Jim's record, I simply click on the Edit button, and back in I go. And we'll probably need to make some changes in here. We'll cancel out of here. But there we are. So I can now see what Jim's role is and what license. Now, here's one of the questions that gets asked a lot about licenses. First of all, can I just give anybody who comes in the Salesforce user license? And the answer is it depends on how many of them you actually have. So within any organization, you're going to purchase licenses. You're purchasing a seat. And at Salesforce, they're going to charge you a certain amount of money per person, per user, every single month. So if you have 10 people on your team and all 10 of them have a Salesforce license, then you're going to be billed 10 times for that seat. Now, if we're adding new people, we probably want to have a few licenses that we can turn to, and that's the situation we have here. Now, in order to determine how many licenses your organization has, I'm going to go back up here, and instead of looking up the users, I'm going to look up company. And one of the things I can do is go into the company information. And the company information right here at the very top, you'll notice it has user licenses. And if I roll over, it will tell me how many licenses I actually have available. So in this case, it's going to tell me that my Salesforce integration license, I have one of them. I haven't used any of them. My Salesforce platform, I have 3 of them. I haven't used any of them. My Salesforce license, the one we just used for Jim, I have 3 of them. Guess what? We've used all 3. We have none left. So if I had somebody else starting next week, let's say, I'm going to need to get a new license first before I can create a user and let that person have access to Salesforce. Now you'll notice chatter free. Yeah, we've used one. We have 4,999. So that's pretty easy. But this is how you would simply go in and get a sense of all of the licenses you had available at any given moment if you needed to make any changes. Okay. Now in this scenario, we're going to just go with what we have, but with the users that we are working with here, Jim is the guy that we're focused on right now. So I can come in here as Jim Bishop, and we're going to talk about one last thing I just want to share with you quickly, and we'll talk more about these things in the future. And that is there's an opportunity that if I need to see what Jim can see, I can log in as Jim. As the admin, I have that power. So if I come and say, let me log in as Jim Bishop. And so now when I go into Salesforce and it's welcoming me, hey, welcome in, I can go in and say, all right, if I go to the opportunities object, right, what can I see, leads and all this. Now there may be things in here that frankly, I don't want Jim to see. So in a future lesson, we're going to talk about how we can come in here and embellish what this user can see, or more importantly, sometimes what they cannot see through the creation of brand new profiles. That's something we'll do in the future, but for right now, that covers what we really need to talk about from the fundamentals of creating a new user. Now, as you're aware, there's a lot of moving parts here. And again, I want to move slowly here because I'm taking into consideration that for a lot of you, this is a brand new exploration, and I don't want to throw a lot of jargon and a lot of possibilities at you. But we're going to notice as we build out users that the role that that user has and the profile that that user has are also going to intertwine. And it's all about making sure that the individual has access to what they need in order to do their job. And again, we'll talk a lot more about this in the future. But that's all I have for you today. Thank you so much for dropping by. I'm Spider, and I'll see you soon.